Welcome to LollieTasking with ADHD. I am your host, Dr. Lollity, a multi-passionate mom of three, a physician, and an ADHD life coach because, like most of you amazing women listening, I have ADHD. Join me as we chat about how ADHD affects our lives and learn strategies to help us all thrive, not just survive, with ADHD so we can live the life we want while accomplishing all our goals. Let's get started. Hello, LollieTaskers. Again, I'm Dr. Lollity, a physician and ADHD trained life coach. And as you guys know, I teach easily distracted women, moms, women with ADHD, strategic ways to maximize your time so you can focus on decreasing overwhelm and finally reach your full potential without any overwhelm. Okay. So today is a special episode because I have the amazing Anikia Nelson, Dr. Nelson. I have known Dr. Nelson for a while. She is someone I love. She's also someone, I'll tell you guys a story later, but at my time when I needed someone, she was there for me and my daughter. She used to help me babysit my daughter when I was in fellowship. So I love her, like really love her. And besides that, that's not why we're here. I digress, hashtag ADHD. Besides that, she's also a physician like myself. She does non-clinical practice. In addition to that, she's a certified yoga instructor, y'all. And as you guys know, meditation and mindfulness has been one of the most researched and actually proven ways to help people with ADHD. So I really thought it was very important to bring her in to just discuss why this is the case and how we can use mindfulness in our daily lives in ADHD. And you guys know I'm all about solutions, right? We all know what the problem is. How can we make our life better and thrive with our ADHD? That's the goal. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Dr. Nelson to the show today. Do you mind introducing yourself, Dr. Nelson?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. So I'm Anikia Nelson. I am originally from Kingston, Jamaica. And like Lola said, I'm a physician by training. I live in Atlanta, Georgia with my husband and our two kids and our dog. And our daughter, who just turned 13 a couple days ago, she has ADHD. Yeah, she's 13. She has ADHD. And she was diagnosed pretty early. I think her formal diagnosis was in elementary school, but there were signs from early on. And so really helping her thrive with her ADHD and having us all really embrace it as part of who she is instead of trying to, fight against it, has really helped her thrive and has broadened my understanding about really how different we all are in terms of how our brains work. And I'll tell a few stories later in the podcast to get into that. But my day job, I am Senior Director of Clinical Product Management at Clarify Health Solutions, which is a healthcare analytics software company based in San Francisco. And as Lola said, I'm also a yoga teacher. And I have my own podcast, which is called the Peaceful, Loving, Vibrant Podcast, which I created to make meditation more accessible to people of color. So the topics we're going to talk about today are really right up my alley in a lot of ways.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I first noticed, I was listening to like one of your Facebook posts and I saw like some of the meditation things you were doing. I was like, this is so amazing. And I love the fact that one of the main things you do is making it more accessible, because I know that a lot of, especially women of color, like we just don't necessarily see meditation as something we want to do or something we should do. There's been a lot of stigma sometimes, especially I would say in a Christian faith too, right?
For sure. 100%.
So could you talk a little bit to that on, I personally think like you can meditate however way you want. Meditation is really just mindfulness of yourself. I would love
Mhm.
to know what your definition of meditation is, and how we can relate it to ourselves.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different types of meditation. The kind that I practice myself and probably talk about the most is mindfulness meditation, which is really becoming present in what's happening right now. So, whether that's really anchoring yourself in your breath, that's one very common way. It might be tuning into your senses. So, there's a quick practice you can do anywhere, anytime. You can notice 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear, 5 things you can feel. And just even like taking a minute to name all the different sounds you can hear around you, birds chirping, or cars driving by, or kids screaming. Very familiar in my house. So those sorts of practices that bring you back to the present moment instead of getting lost in your thoughts,
Mhm.
that is how I would define mindfulness meditation. And even so, we can take it a step further by thinking about a formal practice and an informal practice. So, a formal practice is one where you might be sitting for some duration of time. It could be as short as a minute or less, or 10 minutes. There are some people who meditate for 45 minutes to an hour. There are retreats you can go on where you sit for several hours. So, those are sort of the formal practices. You have sitting meditation, you have walking meditation, where you're really mindful of your steps, your feet hitting the ground, and what you can, see and hear around you. Then there's also the informal practice, which you kind of alluded to when you said incorporating it into your life. So it could be choosing to have a meal without watching a show or scrolling on
Mhm.
your phone, and really noticing like the flavor that you're tasting and the texture of the food in your mouth. Um, it could be staying present with your kids while you're playing, and really, instead of thinking about, oh, how much time is there until dinner and do I have it all together? um, really staying present and noticing what's happening in the moment, which is a really great way to connect with others too, if we stay present. So that kind of describes like the formal and the informal practice. And then there's, of course, more movement based practices like yoga, which certainly involve mindfulness, the tying of the breath to the movement, like we do in a vinyasa practice. So I would say meditation can be what you make it. Certainly, my practice has evolved over time, and the more people I speak with, their practice looks different today than it did, several years ago. So that's kind of, I guess, a whirlwind, high level view of what meditation is to me.
No, I think I love that you said being in the moment and being present is really what meditation is, right? Like a lot of times, especially like people with ADHD, we like to overcomplicate things. And sometimes the simpler you make it, the better it is, right? And one of the things I teach some of my clients also is like the need to be present in the
Mhm.
moment. And people don't understand that being present actually takes practice. We're in a very distracted world already. And then when
Mhm.
we have ADHD, we're even more easily distracted because, we need that dopamine hit every now and then. So you having in your daily routine that ability to just pay attention to, okay, am I in the moment, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now? Like it takes a
Mhm.
lot of like practice, right? But the more you think about it, the more you realize that, okay, I'm in tune. Then it's easier for you to break that, at least from an ADHD standpoint. That's how I think about it. Then it's easier for you to break that distraction, right? Because
Mhm.
there you're thinking, wait, I'm not in the moment. Like I'm
Mhm.
lost in my thoughts, right? Which is something we do a lot. But if you don't practice, if people don't realize they can actually practice and work on it.
Yeah.
And when I even talk about like, I think it's something we need to incorporate. Like I think the initial conversation I had with you when talking about it, I talk about how every hour I take like a minute
Mhm.
and I just like meditate, right? And a lot
Mhm.
of times people think meditation is like, what's the you crossing your leg in a frog position and
Right. On a
doing all
cushion.
that. It's really not that. Like sometimes I'm literally like maybe I've been reading Echoes all day. And then like I just take a moment to myself and just close my eyes and just kind of try to listen to my breath and understand myself. And I feel like taking those short breaks, believe it or not, helps with productivity.
Oh,
What do you think
absolutely.
about that? Is it just me, or do you agree, being the master
No,
yoga
I
teacher that
agree.
you are?
I agree 100%, both from my personal experience and, talking to others as well. I think in the world we live in today, there are so many distractions, and there's this glorification of being busy and overscheduled, and how many things can you do at once?
Mhm.
So we really are not well versed in doing nothing and much less doing one thing at a time. And so I think that weighs on your brain after a while. Actually, one technique that I learned from our daughter, is doing work in timed blocks. So the timer works magic for her. She'll go from a complete mess to like really, really productive, just with saying, okay, we're going to work for 20 minutes and then we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break. And for me, so if I have a day, for example, where I'm in back to back meetings, I'll try and stagger the meetings by 5 minutes or so. Or if I can't do that, if that's impossible, I will just take 3 deep breaths in between each call. So I hang up, from one meeting, or now everything's on Zoom. And before I dial into the next one, I just pause and take 3 deep breaths. And that really simple practice helps me to have some closure in between, some separation. So I'm not bringing if the last meeting was very hectic and stressful and tense, I'm not bringing that energy into the next interaction that I have, because I'm giving myself a chance to reset. And I think those
Right.
mini breaks are kind of like a mini reset or a vacation for your brain for a little bit, just to kind of wipe the slate clean. And then you can bring your renewed energy to the next task, instead of, getting to the end of your day and feeling just completely depleted.
Yeah. I like that idea of just like putting it in throughout the day, because I feel like
Hmm.
that's what we do a lot of times, especially with ADHD. We're really good at like go, 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 and then we crash.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about block scheduling too, and that's why that 25 minutes work and 5 minutes break actually works magic.
Hmm.
A lot of times people with ADHD, when we get into a moment where like we're doing so well, we're like, oh my gosh, I really do not want to take a break. And
Hmm.
I try to encourage us to take a break, because in you not taking a break, actually, it makes your productivity worse, because what ends up
Hmm.
happening is you crash. And that's why a lot of time when people are like, oh my God, if I take a break, I'm going to lose where I'm at and I'm not going to be as productive. And I tell them that's what you think. It's
Hmm.
actually important because our brain already is on the go, even more than the general population. Like the
Hmm.
first time I ever took ADHD medicine, I was like, wait, like this is how people think? Like, because I didn't realize that people don't always have thoughts in their head, right?
Hmm.
Because I've always been like that. Like my brain is always go, 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 go. So you taking that break, not just a lot of times when people think about taking breaks, they're thinking you're taking a break for physical. It's really more
Hmm.
mental break, like taking a mental break. Like even sometimes, like when I take a break, I call it active break. I may go fold laundry for that two
Hmm.
minutes
Hmm.
just to get your mind away from it. I love the idea of taking deep breaths. Do you have any other suggestions of like just quick things that people can do to help them with mental breaks?
Yes. So noticing where your feet are, and you can do that even while you're doing another task. It's very grounding. So especially if I'm about to speak, or make a presentation or something, I will actually make sure my feet are flat on the ground and I can feel, shoes or not, I can feel the ground. Sometimes I'll even picture like energy, like getting energy from the ground, from the earth. So just like noticing where your feet are. You don't even have to change your position or anything, but just those practices that bring you back into your body instead of floating away with your thoughts. So I already mentioned the tapping into your senses. So noticing things you can see. You can switch your gaze. So a lot of us work at a computer all day. Look at something that's further away for a few moments and then come back. We talked about noticing the sounds. And then there are different breathing techniques as well. So deep breaths are one. There's another breathing technique called Kapalabhati that I learned in yoga teacher training, which is a very quick breath, actually. And a lot of people describe it as like an energizing breath. So they're different.
Like that?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I've
Exactly.
done
Yeah.
that before. Okay.
Yeah. And, depending on how you're feeling, especially if you do have ADHD, that might be too activating. But let's say you're, hitting your crash or something and you need like that extra boost to get through the rest of your day. I also think changing your position is very helpful. So if you've been sitting for a while, standing up. I have a standing desk that I work at. So a lot of times in the later half of the day, I'll be standing to work. So noticing where your feet are, tapping into your senses, changing your gaze for a bit, and changing your position, I think are other ways to really come back into your body, so you don't get taken away with your thoughts.
I think it's interesting because even when you talked about looking away and I looked out front, like I even felt a little bit of less strain. Just that 1 second I looked away, I was like, oh, I can see how this works, right? Because sometimes we're like, oh, I can't move away from my computer, which I think we should be able to, like I tell people, like you should be able to get up for at least 30 seconds within an hour. And it's something that we need to incorporate as part of something we need to do. One of the reasons why they think meditation or mindfulness, I should say mindfulness, because people think of meditation in different ways. It helps the people with ADHD is because it helps people develop their inner skills. It also helps them improve their ability to control their attention by helping to strengthen their ability to self-observe and train attention. So that's why I really do think this is something that we talk about that is underutilized in the management of ADHD. We talk a lot about like, strategies and this and that. Sleep is one of them, but I think sleep also kind of goes with meditation, resting your brain, right? But mindfulness, I think, is just one of those things that I think is something we need to have a mindfulness plan, right? What is your mindfulness plan for yourself? Do you have any adults that with ADHD that you've coached on this? And then can we bring it back home to your daughter?
Yeah, so I don't have anyone that I've coached with ADHD, no. So our daughter is the main reason that
I was gonna say, yes, you do.
point
You
of
have a daughter.
focus. Yes, but no adult.
Yeah.
No adult. But one thing I did want to say, that popped into my head as you were speaking about strategies versus mindfulness and self-awareness. I think that, and this is just from my experience kind of navigating the world to help our daughter, I think that a lot of the narrative around ADHD is centered around trying to change the person to fit the world. So the world is built, basically by and for people who don't have the same challenges and superpowers, I would say, as people with ADHD. And a lot of the strategies are less about getting to know yourself and observe yourself and more about here's how to do this so you will fit in. So you will, be able to, blend in public school or, get through in college, those sorts of things. But I think the way mindfulness and meditation differs from that is it's really not trying to change anything and it's really not judging you. It's really building your own self-awareness so you can notice when your attention's drifting. For myself, I noticed after even just a short time of meditating, like a couple of months, I started observing myself kind of in the third person. So, noticing when my mood was off, instead of really having the emotions consume me, there was a part of me that was anxious, or a part of me that was irritated or angry. But there's another part that is like always sturdy and always present and is noticing everything else that's happening. And if I'm able to tap into that part, then I can say, okay, I need, my partner to take the kids. I need to, go for a walk. This is what I need. Instead of allowing that emotion to overcome everything and, be in the driver's seat. And I would, without being somebody who personally has ADHD, I could imagine that kind of similar dialogue happening internally, like, oh, I noticed
For
that my
sure.
attention is drifting. I noticed that I'm having trouble focusing on this thing. I'm noticing that I can't keep my body still right now. That was one of the things with our daughter. So, being able to really observe yourself, which we don't do often because we are either anticipating what's happening in the future, or we're stressing about what happened in the past. We're getting taken away with thoughts. So, really, the meditation practice serves to bring you back to the moment and gives you that experience of observing yourself so that you can get to know yourself better and you can adapt in the way that makes sense for you rather than trying to try on all these different strategies that other people, might work for other people but might not work for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you. And we actually, part of the our coaching and Accomplish with Ease starts with awareness. And
Hmm.
one of the most, if you don't have your awareness of your ADHD, it's actually quite almost impossible to be able to improve your ADHD symptoms, because it starts with awareness and then acceptance and realizing that there's really nothing to change about you.
Hmm.
What's going on is we are like, and this is what I do because I say it's almost like we're left-handed people in a right-handed world, right?
Right.
Like the world is right-handed. I'm right-handed, so I don't think about it. But every now and then I have to get a left-handed scissors for a child I know, right? And learning those strategies doesn't necessarily mean that you change yourself per se, but knowing
Hmm.
that there's nothing wrong with you. Because as soon as you think there's something wrong with you, I always say you cannot win with ADHD. You're going to be fighting against the wind.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the earlier you accept yourself for that, the better. And I think that's why I love mindfulness so much, for the reasons that you stated, because it teaches you that awareness of who you are.
Hmm.
And it also teaches you that empowerment of, it's not about I can't control, or I'm trying to control my ADHD,
Right.
or I can't control my ADHD. It's not that. It's more like, now I see what's going on. What are the things I'm going to do to
Hmm.
help me, right? Because a lot of people with ADHD, they want to get straight A's, they want to reach their goals, they want, they want the same thing everybody does. But, you know, like I always say, we always prioritize the things we should not do over the things that we should do, because that's more exciting,
Hmm.
So, but that's awareness. Um, but no, so I really appreciate you saying that, because it's amazing when I hear parents say that, or people who don't have ADHD say that, because it helps demystify this idea of, oh, they just can't do this, or they just
Right.
can't do that. And your daughter is so lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we kind of had a breakthrough moment the other day. So cleaning her room and doing laundry, those have been just like complete struggles, even when she's like doing amazing in school. Like, those kind of mundane care tasks are just not, there's like no dopamine hit for that. So I was actually, and I'm still working my way through this book called How to Keep House While Drowning. And it's written by a counselor who also has ADHD. And she kind of reframes cleaning to be care tasks, things that we do, to reset our space. And she offers different strategies around basically taking care of your home, your space. And one of the techniques that she has is she doesn't fold her laundry. So when the dryer goes off and the clothes are still warm, she lays them in a basket. So they're just kind of laid flat in the basket so they don't get wrinkled. And then you kind of just live out of the basket. So for me, growing up, that was just like a complete no-no. um, and like I said, like the folding of the clothes with our daughter has just been an issue. So after I read that, I was like, hey, look, I just learned about this strategy from somebody who also has ADHD, just like you. I went to Target and I bought the biggest laundry basket I could find. I was like, look, this is your basket. Your clothes are in the dryer. Just like take them out and lay them in here. And she was all on board, so much so that I went into the laundry room to find her folding her clothes. So I think it goes, yeah. It goes back to kind of realizing that you don't have to do things the way everyone else does. I think for her, that like offering on my part, like here's another way that might be more suited to how your brain works, was like really just acceptance for her. Like, a big welcoming hug, like it's okay, you don't have to do things the same way that I do. And it probably also gave her this freedom as well, and empowerment too. So the basket method has been working for us so far, just to offer that out.
I love that so much. And as someone who has ADHD and kids with ADHD, I have tons of strategies for you. So if you ever need to talk, I'm here for you.
Okay.
But I would actually really want to hear, like, how do you, because I've seen your daughter with her yoga poses online. Like, how do you guys use mindfulness to help her as well? Maybe that's something we can incorporate with our kids too. As you probably know, a lot of moms, a lot of kids who have ADHD probably got it from their parents. So most of us here also have children with ADHD. So I would love to get my daughter in that mindfulness because she's, thank God for her life.
Yeah. So first of all, I think, and our daughter is my stepdaughter, so I didn't have her when she was a baby or a toddler, but I want to point out just from our son, who I've had since, before birth, toddlers are extremely mindful. Babies are in the moment, like they are not anywhere else. They're very engrossed in what's happening now. And I think it's with time and socialization and, introduction to this busy, busy world, especially outside of our homes, that's when we start to get distracted and pulled away, especially when we introduce devices into the picture. So I think limiting devices is a great way to incorporate like an informal mindfulness practice. So whatever it is that your kids are doing, shutting the TV off in the background, music is great, I think, because it does allow you to still be present. But limiting devices, for younger kids, I would say narrating what's happening. So sometimes when I am playing with our son, he's 2.5, I might say things like, oh, you're building a tower, or wow, you're using the red crayon to color that apple, or, things like that. So not necessarily asking questions or quizzing. I think kids get quizzed a lot, but really just describing what's happening is a way for me to stay in the moment and really embracing him being in the moment as well. Allowing your kids to lead. So they spend a lot of their day doing what we tell them to do, or we're trying to get them to do what we tell them to do. So having those pockets of time where they lead and we join their world, I think is a really nice way to really just like celebrate the fact that they are engrossed in the present moment. So, maybe we're doing a music parade around the kitchen, which is something we do with our son a lot. Or maybe we are looking at costumes, for our daughter. She's really into costumes and makeup and that sort of thing. But really like joining into what they're doing instead of them always having to get on board with what we say it's time to do. Um, then, in terms of a formal practice for our daughter, yoga has been helpful. There is a YouTube channel called Cosmic Kids Yoga, where the instructor, she's from the UK, she creates these stories. Like for the younger kids, there's one that's on a farm. And so each of the poses represents a farm animal, and there's songs included. And so it's like the physical movement plus the story really engrossing themselves in the story. That's helpful. Sitting meditation has probably been the most helpful practice for our daughter over time. And we started more formally when she was about 9 or 10. And she would just sit next to me in whatever position she found comfortable. And we'd use a timer. There's an app called the Insight Timer app, and we would just use the timer on there for meditation. And then for sleep, because I'm sure everyone's familiar with, when you settle down, when you're trying to settle down to sleep, that's when your mind decides to think of the 100 things it wants to remind you about. So for sleep, for adults, the yoga nidra meditation, there's no physical piece to it. It's really just a meditation, a guided meditation for your mind to help you settle down to sleep. I've never heard the end of it, so that tells you how good it is. But for our daughter, we use kids sleep meditation. It's a lot like a bedtime story, but it might have visualizations like, oh, there's a hot air balloon. So it's telling a story like there's a hot air balloon floating in the sky, and then the kid will be guided through taking deep breaths to like fill the balloon. So things like that. Insight Timer has quite a few that are free. So for a long time, at least a year, our daughter used to go to sleep by listening to those meditations. And then I think that's probably about it, because I talked about the informal stuff like being present in the moment already.
Yeah, so I think that's something I have always incorporated like mindfulness throughout the day. But I think that's actually somewhere where I'm lacking with my kids and helping them, teaching them to be present in the moment. Especially like, kids, I was like, I'm bored. And I'm like, you need to learn how to love being bored,
Yeah.
because it's actually in that boredom that they learn their mindfulness. Um, so I think that's something I'm actually like thinking. I'm like, okay, how can I incorporate mindfulness into our routine? And I think one thing that stands out to me is it doesn't have to be like something complicated, right?
No, not at all.
It just has to be something. And it doesn't have to be boring. It can be fun. It can be, and it's something I will have to sit down and maybe discuss with you later, like what I can do. But we're wrapping up the podcast now. Is there something else you wanted to make sure you got across to people about yoga or mindfulness and ADHD?
Sure. I think we probably hit all of the main points because we talked about, building self-awareness. And
Mhm.
probably the other piece I would add before we close is how meditation helps you build self-compassion as well.
Mm.
And especially thinking about how difficult it is for people with ADHD to, focus and be productive in the world as it is today. I imagine that that can come with a lot of beating yourself up or wishing things were different or, not feeling like you're measuring up. So I have found that incorporating mindfulness practices help to foster that compassion for myself, which I think gives me a lot more grace and allows me to be more generous in how I describe and interpret how I'm feeling and how I'm behaving and those sorts of things. The other thing, last thing I would mention too is I know that for people with ADHD, sometimes anxiety and depression can kind of coexist with ADHD. And there are lots of studies now in the literature that show the benefits of a formal meditation practice in alleviating those symptoms of anxiety and depression. So if if that's something that you're struggling with, I'd say that's even more reason to start a formal practice, whatever that looks like for you. And thinking about that formal practice not as an all or nothing, so not can I meditate today or not, but rather like how much time can I dedicate to this practice today, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, or longer. Or, like you said, carving out a little bit of time every hour or so throughout your day. So, just kind of encouraging us all to be a little bit more compassionate towards ourselves and realizing we don't have to have it all together all the time. And that, everything's temporary. The things that we struggle with today, we won't struggle with forever.
Absolutely. I just want to thank you so much, especially mentioning the compassion part, because as you probably know, people with ADHD are the most empathetic people I ever know, but they don't extend that grace to themselves.
Right.
They extend it to everybody else. So I appreciate you mentioning that. For most of you guys, I don't know, whenever we bring a guest onto the podcast, they're actually also live with the Accomplished with Ease community. And there's a interesting question that someone just posed, and it said, is coloring an adult or is coloring in an adult coloring book a form of mindfulness? I think I know what the answer is to this, but I'll let you take it, Dr. Nelson.
Sure, yes, I think it is. I started,
I
or I
love
guess
it.
restarted, since we all probably colored in kindergarten. But I restarted coloring shortly after leaving clinical medicine, actually, because that was a time of very heightened stress for me. And that was before I really knew anything about a formal meditation practice. And I think it is a form of mindfulness and meditation because it's such a calming activity,
Mhm.
and the activity is such that you can still be really in tune with what's happening. It's not terribly distracting from what's happening in your internal dialogue and your feelings. Um, so yes, I absolutely have had times where I, made a cup of tea, put some nice music on, and start coloring, a little or a lot, and it does do wonders for my mood. So yes, I would say that's a really nice coping mechanism, and it can be a mindful activity, if you really allow yourself to get engrossed in it.
Yes, I'm 100% with you in that, in like the ADHD journal I made, like the front actually has a coloring part because
Oh,
I
nice.
love it so much, where like you can like color just a little bit every day to help you kind
Mhm.
of get in tune. I love coloring. It's something I rediscovered a couple of years ago too. And like you, I would sometimes like instead of watching television, sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to color. And it's always so calming to the brain. There's just something about taking the coloring pencil or the color pencil to paper, right?
Mhm.
There's just something amazing about it. So I will agree it's a form of mindfulness as well. So one last thing. So people with ADHD, we like to take a lot of notes and want to do everything at once. So at the end of my episodes, I always tell my listeners, just pick one thing and
Mhm.
focus on it. And since I have a guest today, I would like for you, if after listening to everything today, if there's one thing they could do, what is that one thing you think they should do that would help them with mindfulness?
Yeah, so it's hard to pick one thing. There's so many things racing through my mind, but I think one thing that's probably easy to remember and very often accessible is checking in with where your feet are.
Hmm.
Whether you're standing, sitting, no matter the activity you're doing, checking in, where are my feet? Are my feet on the ground? What do I feel? Is a way to quickly bring ourselves back into our bodies. And then you can even extend it to scanning through your body, from your feet up to your head and seeing just what you're feeling. Are you holding tension in any areas of your body? So I'd say if I can sum it up, that one thing is coming back to your physical body and checking in with yourself, what you're feeling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for it. And I'm sure people are listening to it and like, I need to hit up Dr. Nelson, right? So, how can people get in touch with you? We'll put all your information in the show note, but just so people
Yeah.
hear from you, how can they get in touch with you? And do you still do yoga practices? I know you have a podcast. Like, how can people connect
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah, so I think the best way to connect is to listen to the podcast. So it's the Peaceful, Loving, Vibrant podcast. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and pretty much everywhere where you listen. Um, I am also on Instagram at Peaceful, Loving, Vibrant. So sometimes I'll post, helpful things on there. I'll try to be more consistent. But I'd say the podcast is the best way and Instagram as well, to kind of join the community and benefit from the conversations that I've had. I'm slowly releasing season 3. I just,
Nice.
depending on when this is published, I just released an episode where I talk about gentle parenting with a parenting coach
Mm.
and the role of meditation there. So I'd say that's a good way to connect with me.
That is an amazing episode. I look forward to because I'm working on that myself.
Me
So,
too.
but I could talk to you forever. But I just want to thank you again for joining us on another amazing episode. It was such an amazing time just discussing mindfulness. You know how much I love mindfulness and how much it helps my ADHD personally. And I think it's something that we don't talk a lot about, to be honest, in the ADHD community. And I hope that as people listen today, it's something they maybe try to reconnect with and see if they can, even starting with, just closing my eyes every hour or something just to help your brain just reset. Like, yeah, I like the word you said, like it just helps you reset that mental capacity that we have. I think is so, so important. So thank you, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And all you guys listening, I'm sure you can't wait to get to talk to Dr. Nelson. We will leave all her information in the show notes. But with that being said, thank you again for listening to another amazing episode of LollieTasking. Don't forget to follow us on IG at LollieTaskers. You can always email us if you have any topics you want us to discuss at hello@lollytasking.com. So next time, remember, you can do it too with some planning, a little bit of balance, and some mindfulness, and a dash of determination. This is LollieTasking with ADHD. Thanks for hanging out with us on another episode of LollieTasking with ADHD. If you like what you've heard today, I would love for you to click the subscribe button, rate, and leave a great review, in addition to sharing with your friends. Your review allows visibility and also allows other amazing women to find this podcast. Also, if you have any questions or topics you would like for us to discuss, please contact me via direct message on Instagram at LollieTasker or email us at hello@lollytasking.com. Till next time, this is LollieTasking with ADHD.